This regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners to order for Tuesday, November 27th, 2018. And our first item on the agenda is adjustments to the agenda. Any adjustments to the agenda? Any adjustments to the agenda? Mr. Mokrzycki, any adjustments?
No.
Seeing none, then we'll move on to item number 2, which is public comment. Do we have anyone signed up?
Evan?
Yeah. If you want to go ahead and step up and,
We moved it.
yeah, because the camera went down over here, so they only got that camera. So you'll
Morning,
state,
gentlemen. My name is Bob Holland. I'm chairman of the board of the Dexter Rural Fire Protection District. And I'm just here this morning to lend my support to your budget item, or your agenda item number 7, dealing with the Dexter Mill property sale. Dexter Fire's been working with Mr. Wright and also with Lane County Public Works and Hazmat cleaning up that site. And we are excited to see this move on to a much more productive asset to the community. Dexter Fire's been the responding agency to a number of calls there, and we are excited to see it put to a good purpose and to bring more community development to the Dexter area. So that's all I have to say. Appreciate your support on that issue.
thank you. Appreciate you coming in on a rainy morning.
Just briefly, if I might, thank you, Detective Holland, for helping me find my stolen car back in the 1980s. Of course I do. How can I? My Toyota Tercel, I loved it. But it was upside down.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that brings us to, speaking of commissioners' response to public comments and other issues or remonstrance. Commissioner Sorensen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to mention that the Lane County Board of Commissioners appointed a task force on homelessness and affordable housing, and that was in March of 1989. And on that task force were 2 Lane County commissioners, Ellie Dumdye and Jerry Rust, several Eugene City Councilors, Rob Bennett among them, prominent citizens such as Terry McDonald, Gene Tate, Greg Vick, and they made a report from the county staff with Steve Manella and Chris Totis and Jim McCoy from AXA. They made a report, and after all their work, and while I was cleaning out my storage locker, I found this report and decided I would bring it to the board meeting and pass it along to Mr. Mokrzycki, because a lot of public effort from what is now called Homes for Good and Lane County, Mr. Manella, as well as my predecessor, Mr. Commissioner Rust, all contributed to this report. It's nice and tidy. It makes some suggestions, some of which may be relevant for today, and I'll pass that along to Mr. Mokrzycki today. Thank you.
Piece of history. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate your comments, but in extension to that, it's not gone without notice by me and many other folks that Dexter Fire District has participated in a lot of firefighting and life-saving opportunities or business outside of your direct district. I'm reminded this past spring when the Witzel Mill was burning in Saginaw. You folks were right there covering that, and I know there were 2 or 3 other pretty significant incidences over the summer where Dexter Fire was there and assisting. So thank you for that, and if you would extend that to your colleagues, I'd appreciate that. Thank you for what you do.
Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe there is a brand new 5A football champion.
Yeah.
And the trophy belongs in Springfield, Oregon at Thurston High School. So I want to congratulate Thurston High School for winning the 5A championship. They defeated Wilsonville 30-27. And so great congratulations. Coach Stark is actually, this is his 2nd trip to the state finals. And so he's 1-1, and I want to congratulate him. He's coach and the athletic director at Thurston, but great job. And this is a team that actually they were a good team, but weren't necessarily the team expected to win the title. And so they really overachieved and did a great job. And I want to just offer again, great congratulations, Coach Stark, Thurston High School football team, for bringing the trophy to Springfield.
Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. You know, I need to respond to that. I love Thurston, but I coach soccer at Springfield High School, and Thurston, you guys tore our goalpost down like that. I didn't like that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, just want to offer congratulations and commendations for all the work we've done in the last 3 weeks regarding finding safe, secure, and sanctioned housing for people who otherwise have been camping in unsanctioned places. It's not the ideal and it's not the permanent situation, but we have people today who are really in a position where they're not being moved along at night. Certainly isn't a very comfortable environment, particularly in light of the weather that we're experiencing today. But Mr. Mokrihise, I want to thank you especially for the really was a very, very heavy lift about 3 weeks ago that when we found a place. First time that I've ever seen such a response, and I've looked throughout the Northwest and throughout the United States, and I've never really quite seen anything quite like it, where you really were able to consolidate a lot of different conditions into one single location. I visit that location pretty often. It's in my district. It's just a couple of miles from my front doorstep, so it's easy for me to stop by there 3 or 4 times a day. And really, things are the neighboring businesses, while continuing to keep an eye and continuing to be concerned about the added services. It is adjacent to the Lindholm Service Center. It's also adjacent to the Dusk to Dawn Winter Strategies program of St. Vincent de Paul. So a great many people who are experiencing homelessness are frequenting that area. But the neighbors are doing a very good job of being alert and making sure that if any small thing happens, and that's all that's really happened, and if any small things that happen, I hear about it, we hear about it, and we're able to rectify whatever situations arise. Thank you for dedicating the resources to it, and thank you for our ongoing work toward, actually, our main goal is permanent housing. That's what we want. Understanding that that's not going to happen overnight. We have several steps along the way. Adding this low barrier shelter, temporary though it may be, as one step toward making certain that people do have a safe place to sleep at night that is legal, sanctioned, and that is not going to cause anybody to be disturbed in the middle of the night and move along. There's a lot to be said about that, and I could go on for quite some time about what my aspirations are personally, what my dreams are about finding places for people to live. But let it remain that congratulations for the work that Lane County has done, particularly marshaling the assistance of our adjacent and overlapping jurisdictions. So very well done, Mr. Mokrihise. Thank you.
So I also, would extend my thanks to the administrator and his staff for what they've done out at 99. I know he spent an entire Saturday out there. It wasn't exactly in his contract to be moving porta pots. So really appreciate that. I do want to report, I attended the mayor's quarterly meeting that they have for Lane County as the chair. I attend those. And Mayor Larson brought forward, as she sits on the Poverty and Homelessness Board representing rural communities, brought forward to the mayors the request to try and increase overnight camping opportunities this winter to the other communities. And there was quite a discussion about the issues around that and the barriers and problems that some of these rural communities have with trying to add to their housing stock in general. So it was a good discussion, but I appreciate Mayor Larson for bringing that initiative forward from one of the members of the Poverty and Homelessness Board kind of challenged the group to see if we could expand the number of overnight camping spots. And she was basically bringing that challenge to all of the mayors that were in attendance. And there was quite a discussion about that. And I know that Veneta actually has gone through some code changes to make it churches have the ability to host car camping sites within the city of Benita, which was not previously allowed under their code. So they're moving in that direction in Benita. I don't know whether other jurisdictions are moving that fast or not, but it was an interesting discussion. The usual issues about, our code doesn't allow it right now, and if we try and allow it, we get a lot of pushback, and, all those issues of trying to deal with it. But there wasn't one mayor that didn't say they did not have homeless in their community.
Mr. Chair, I will have an agenda team request subsequent to, at the end of this meeting regarding that.
Great. So any other, Commissioner Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take this opportunity to draw everybody's attention to the pins and holders before you. See, Mr. Mokahysky has one, and each of us. I had the opportunity and the pleasure to represent the Board of Commissioners at the Veterans Legacy dedication several weeks ago. It was a beautiful day. There were many, many happy people assembled, some very august personages there. But these pins, each pin was used by me to sign the articles of exchange between the county and Veterans Legacy. And I just wanted to call that to your attention, that we can be proud of that effort and that opportunity to assist those folks who have gone the extra mile for the country and for us. And so as you look at those pins, each time you use it, take a look at the Veterans Legacy there and think about those people who are in the trenches and on the line and who have served this country. And it's our opportunity to offer a little bit of assistance to them. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And if people don't know that this is the fine craftsmanship of Commissioner Farr, who does wonderful work with wood. Also want to remind folks, as it is Giving Tuesday, that Veterans Legacy is participating in Giving Tuesday, where there is match coming. I forget who's doing the national match, but they also have a foundation that's matching, so you can get 3 for 1 if you go on and contribute to Veterans Legacy today. So if you want to just Google that, probably can find a link to do that and work on the Giving Tuesday for Veterans Legacy as they work to set up a program that will be low barrier and specific to veterans as far as getting them some much needed assistance sometimes in reintegrating into society. So it's really a great charity. I think we can all look for that today, as it is Giving Tuesday. Further remonstrance? If not, we'll move on. Is there any emergency business today?
No.
Seeing none, we'll move to the consent calendar. I will note that we did get an email about item 5C2 and the fact that the minutes and board and packet that went to the audit committee that generated the 2-0 vote, the 2-0 vote was noted in our item, but the actual package that went to the audit committee to be voted on for the 2-0 vote wasn't available immediately through this link, and that is being fixed ultimately online today as we're meeting here today. That the links will be put in that item to get you through to the audit committee package, so folks that are interested can look. So with that, the consent items are considered to be routine, and if there's been a desire to discuss them separately, even though I just did a little bit, we would have pulled them from the consent calendar. So with that, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Select to move approval of the consent calendar for November 27th, 2018.
Second?
It's been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. So with that, we'll move on to item 6A, which is the Sheriff's Office, Order 1811-2706, in the matter of accepting a grant in the amount of $550,000 awarded by the Office of Justice Programs for the Lane County Veterans Treatment Court Mentoring and Domestic Violence Intervention Enhancement Grant, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute subcontracts for the grant. And I don't see Danielle here. Do you know if she's on her way?
We'll check on that, Mr. Chair.
If not, maybe while we're filling for a minute, we could jump to county administration announcements.
And we're still in the process. I did want to update the board on Camp 99. I don't have those final updates prepared at the moment, so my hope was we could do that a little bit later, or even as part of the public hearing for the item later this morning, assuming there may be some comments or questions about that.
I think some of our staff are a little surprised about how quickly we're getting through our agenda today. We were expecting a bit more public comment this morning.
We can also ask, Jeff Turk is in the building, so we can ask.
Yeah, maybe we can move on to item 7A while we're waiting for Danielle, if Jeff is available. And listening, he can jump in here. And while we have our audience member that was interested in this item, so why don't we take care of Public Works item 7A, Order 1811-2707, in the matter of authorizing the sale of county-owned real property for $500,000 to Wright Lumber, Inc. pursuant to a lease purchase option agreement, tax map number 1901-0800, lot 3800, and it's at 38534 Dexter Road. And as Jeff on his way. Jeff is, okay, so we got to wait 10 minutes for Jeff. Danielle's not available. And as we try and vamp for a couple minutes because we're well ahead of our 10:30 time certain,
You want to do agenda team requests?
let's see who's popping out the door here. Looks like we're going to take care of maybe some county council announcements.
As we're getting settled, Mr. Chair, there was one item. I'll let Mr. Dingle get settled here. There's an open request from Commissioner Farr at a prior meeting for an update on, I don't have the specific request, regarding Camp 99. There was a request to look at, zoning and the potential use of the Highway 99 county-owned property for a future public shelter. We had, that was tentatively scheduled to come forward next week. Because we have some meetings, we have a meeting scheduled tomorrow. Commissioner Farr is participating in that. I have a meeting this evening with Peace Health executives around this topic as well. What I would like to do is next week, as part of my announcements, provide an update to the board regarding the what's happening at Camp 99 and sort of the transition process that is planned in the short and long term, as well as the effort we're going through to evaluate the feasibility of Camp 99 or other sites for a public shelter. So I'd ask that I could update the board on that under announcements next week and sort of paint that full context picture. But I want to bring that here and maybe look to Commissioner Farr to see if that would satisfy.
That will be fine,
request.
yeah. There's a lot of, the site is a pretty large site, and we own 2 buildings on that site. There's a 3rd building we don't own, so. And the request, just a refresher, was to the best and highest use for the entire property.
Right. So I'd like to provide that update next week as part of my announcements. And then we will keep that as an open assignment going forward, because obviously it's going to require a significant amount of effort.
So do you want to take care of county council announcements real quick, other than we have an exec session at the end of the day today?
I have one very brief announcement, but I wanted to, there was some action taken by the city council last night, and I know I updated all of the board with an email indicating that Judge Barron's ruling on our summary judgment motion with regard to the butterfly lot and its uses and the property exchange, I sent that to everybody. The city passed a motion last night to extend, you'll recall that they had set a deadline of, I think, early December, I think December 7th, to complete, for us to have a final order on that. And the appeal period, which the only person who is going to appeal would be Mr. Darling. He's indicated he is not going to appeal to the Court of Appeals. Doesn't run until the 16th, so they extended that deadline to work out the details of the purchase and sale agreement until early January. So that's, I just wanted to update the board. That process is moving forward.
Excellent, thank you.
And I'm prepared on the Wright lumber matter if.
You want to handle? Go ahead.
I don't see Mr. Wright here.
Yeah.
And I thought Mr. Turk was going to be here, but I did.
One day in 1987, he was Mr. Wright.
Toyota Tercel, yes, I heard.
Yeah, so we will jump back then to item 7A. And I already read that in, so if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, sure, Chair and members of the board. You recall, I don't remember when exactly this proposal initially came forward, but the board gave direction to work with Mr. Wright in relocating his business from Springfield to the former mill site in Dexter. So Mr. Turk, myself, and Ms. Means have been, met a couple of times with him. You'll recall we had an executive session on this. And I think we're there. Ms. Means was able to contact Mr. Wright's current landlord and grant him an extension that'll facilitate this. And really, the agreement, the heart of the agreement is the one that's attached. I will tell you that the couple of things that have been kind of counter-proposed by him we need to work out is, one, whether or not he is going to need a no further action letter to obtain financing. We feel pretty good about the level 1 ESA that's going to come through. And I think I have explained, and I'll do it publicly, that lease, the lease amount, the rent, was done to facilitate him building up the necessary cash flow to bring the bridge up to the standard that it needs. And that's why there's the difference in the price. You'll notice that I want to underline that for the public. It had an assessed value of approximately $800 and some thousand, but it was also close to $200,000 to bring the bridge up to code and do some other stuff. So essentially, he's going to pay for that, so we adjusted the price accordingly. It's been a pleasure to work with Mr. Wright. We're working together cooperatively, and I'm confident that we're going to be able to, the last couple of issues that need to be ironed out, I'm confident we can do that, and it's my hope that in the next couple of weeks, we will have that final agreement worked out. That's why it has the language that it does in the board order, which is substantially similar to this. That way it won't be necessary to come back to the board as we iron out these last 2 or 3 different issues. One of them is the type of title that he would like to have, and some concern about if there is hazardous material found as a result of the ESA, who's going to be responsible for that. But I have every confidence we're going to be able to work that out. And the one thing that he was under was time pressure where he was. I don't know if you remember that and so we've got that sort of pressure valve relieved, so I'm confident we can get this thing taken care of. And I agree with the person in public comment. We've heard nothing but positive things about this. It puts the thing back on, it puts the property back on the tax rolls. It eliminates what it amounted to a public nuisance in that area. Obviously, it's going to eliminate the need for service calls there. It's going to bring jobs. It's a win-win-win. So that's all I have unless you have a specific question.
Any questions for staff on the lease? Then I will entertain a motion. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move approval of order number 18-11-27-07 in the matter of authorizing the sale of county-owned real property for $500,000 to Wright Lumber Company pursuant to a lease purchase option agreement, map number 19-01-08-00-03800 for the property at 38534 Dexter Road.
Second. And request speak to the motion.
So it was moved by Commissioner Williams, seconded by Commissioner Farr. I think he beat you. And I'll recognize Commissioner Farr to speak to the motion.
Thank you. I just want to talk about wood products in general. You know, we grow trees in Lane County, lots of them, and we manufacture them in many different ways. But this mill is very different in that it remanufactures. It takes previously manufactured products and turns them into different, more easily, readily shipped products. It's pretty exciting to see a facility this size relocating in Lane County in a way that really the products that have been already manufactured one time will be manufactured yet again. So we look for manufacturing. This is remanufacturing, double manufacturing. And it's products, once again, that ship relatively inexpensively to a pretty broad variety of locations. Close to the I-5 corridor, really the world is open to the products that come out of this remanufacturing mill. And I'm really pleased to see the board moving forward with this. And Mr. Dingle, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Turk, for all the work that went into this, into getting us to this point. It's a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other comments, questions on the motion, discussion of the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
They're ready. And
That
what I'll
gets-
do, excuse me, Chair Bozovich, what I'll do is when the final lease has been negotiated and it's been signed by Mr. Mokrahysky, I will send the board an email with that so that you know that it's been completed.
Excellent, thank you. So with that, we will jump back to item 6A, which is Order 1811-2706 in the matter of accepting a grant in the amount of $550,000 awarded by the Office of Justice Programs for the Lane County Veterans Treatment Court Mentoring and Domestic Violence Intervention Enhancement Grant, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute subcontracts for the grant. And we have Danielle Hansen, our treatment court coordinator. So,
Good morning.
thank you, Danielle.
I apologize for our tardiness. I was in court and was juggling when we were going to be here and came running down. I would like to start out with a note from Judge Rickley in terms of this award. She is in court right now overseeing our docket, but she did want to pass on a message to you all. Greetings. Sorry I could not be present as duty calls as we served 2 treatment court dockets today, our adult treatment court this morning and mental health court this afternoon. We as citizens have a duty to support our veterans who have served and protected us, and now, as a result of their service, they desperately need our service help. And we have a duty to remove barriers by providing mentorship, treatment, housing, wellness, and mental health counseling so these men and women can return to their lives they deserve. Our veterans need and deserve mentors who can walk them through these different systems and do so with dignity and grace. The paradigm of expecting people to stop committing crime and stop using drugs by jailing them without treatment is a thing of the past. Would you ever suggest to a diabetic that she think her way out of high blood pressure? Would you ask a person suffering from cancer to just tough it out without medical intervention? I want to thank our community partners for their continued support for our Veterans Treatment Court. The Lane County DA's Office, the Lane County Sheriff's Office, Lane Council of Governments, Public Defender Services of Lane County, sponsors, Relief Nursery, Emergence, Parole and Probation, the VA, and Access the Law. So that is the note from Judge Rickley today. So our grant in the amount of $550,000, we received an additional $50,000. The original application was for $500,000. It's a 3-year grant with the 4th year being for evaluation period, which runs from January 1st, 2019 through the end of December of 2022. This is the first what I refer to as a big federal grant for our Veterans Treatment Court. We receive funds from the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, but this is the first solely large application that we've been awarded through the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the grant really focuses on expanding our treatment court, providing evidence-based interventions and mentorship program. Since the inception of our Veterans Treatment Court, we've had volunteer veteran mentor coordinators, and having this as a paid position will really help in the recruitment and retention and the training of the veterans. The camaraderie that is created within our veterans in the program, and having those other veterans that have been there and had that experience is really important, and being able to support them in having them receive having it be a paid position, I think will really help our program grow. Our program serves a lot of veterans who are in the criminal justice system for domestic violence related offenses. And so having a program where we have the Strength at Home, and we have the creator of the program providing technical assistance, and having an evaluator doing randomized controlled trial to have a veteran-specific batter's intervention with the Strength at Home program is really, I think, exciting for our county to be able to see what's working, and to serve our veterans that really need that support after they return. So just real brief on some of the statistics since our program has started. We've served a total of 123 veterans. We've graduated 56, which represents a 57% graduation rate. 7 of those graduates had prison hanging over their heads, totaling 140 months. And as a part of their successful completion of the program and probation, we've saved taxpayer dollars over $355,000 for those that had prison. There's a lot more stats and savings that I could share for them being out of just the local jail and into our program, but I thought that was important to share today. And lastly, the interaction that our veterans have with the judge, Judge Rookley, currently overseeing the docket. They look to her as their commander-in-chief. So the structure and the supervision that Veterans Treatment Court offers is a really successful model. I think that's everything I have.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about Veterans Court in a subsequent round, but first I'd like to talk about Judge Rookley for just a second. Judge Rookley is going to be leaving the Veterans Court. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure, yes. Her time on our docket ends the end of this year. As a part of the judicial assignment, just things rotate. She's been with us for 4 years, which is longer term than most of our treatment court judge. At least in my time, it's usually about a 2-year rotation, or sometimes 3, but we've been really blessed to have her for those 4 years. And Judge Love will be taking on the docket starting the beginning of January.
Thank you, Danielle. And, I sat in the back of Judge Rookley's court, and in the Veterans Court, in the drug court, and in the mental health treatment court, and I've been at the graduations. And the way Judge Rookley has handled it, you talk about a 56% graduation rate. I don't know that would have happened without the leadership that she has exhibited throughout the years that she served in that position. I'm excited about Judge Love becoming taking over the docket, and I'm excited about the foundation that Judge Love is building on. That being said, Judge Rookley has been just a tremendous asset in her role as the treatment court judge, as the veterans judge, and as mental health judge. We'll miss her there, but she became our Ted Kulongoski appointed her, I think, in April of 2010. And that was the year that she started serving as a circuit judge. But Judge Rookley, before she became a judge, her entire work was surrounding people who didn't have the resources to defend them, to build an adequate defense. When she started her work, I believe she maybe started in Florida originally. Yep. And her work was really was dealing with people who otherwise would not have gotten a decent defense. Or maybe not, but she really has dedicated her life to taking care of people who need the most help. She demonstrated that through her work with the Veterans Court, with the Treatment Court, with the Mental Health Court, and I know that her work's not going to go away, that she's going to continue to be a leader. I believe she's moving to Juvenile Court. It's going to be a leader and a tremendous asset in Juvenile. So I walked in with Judge Rookley this morning, which is always a pleasure, and it's just, I'm glad she's going to stay with us, and I'm glad that she's going to be around, but we will certainly miss her. And wish Judge Love great success, and as great a success as Judge Rogley has had these years in Veterans Court. Thank you.
Thank
Further discussion or questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Do you want to do the motion, Pat? If you'd like.
I can do it. Let me pull it up, Leanna. I'm sorry.
I've got it if
I
you.
lost my agenda. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Mr. Chair, I move passage of Order 1811-2706 in the matter of accepting a grant in the amount of $550,000 awarded by the Office of Justice Programs for the Lane County Veterans Treatment Court Mentoring and Domestic Violence Intervention Enhancement Grant, and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute subcontracts for the grant.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Lyken. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Farr, did you want to
Well, yeah,
extend your comments now on treatment court?
my thanks mean absolutely nothing compared to the thanks of particularly the parents who sit out here during those graduations. You know, when you see parents just weeping, thinking that they'd lost their child to the justice system, and that their child had been rescued from the justice system. And some of these children are 40, 50 years old, you know, or maybe older than that. But to see the look of, there's no way to describe it. I mean, the tears that stream down people's faces sitting in that room right there, my thanks mean nothing compared to the pictures that Judge Rogley and that you have in your head, Daniel, of the people who do graduate. It's an amazing thing that we do. It's a truly amazing thing. Thank you.
And if I could add, which I forgot to note, we have Veterans Treatment Court graduation on Thursday. We're graduating 5 more veterans here in court. So it's a great day, and it'll be great for Judge Rogley to be able to really end on such a great note with Veterans Court.
Will that be in her courtroom?
Yes.
With the usual fanfare afterwards of fruit and crackers and
Yes.
cheeses, and all right, I love it. I'll be there.
Okay.
Further discussion to the motion. I just want to take a minute and one, thank Judge Rogley, and also just our partners over at the district court in the Public Safety Coordinating Council and the efforts we've made here in Lane County under the Justice Reinvestment Act and the work we've done to really control our prison usage and reduce recidivism. This is just, one piece of that. But, I went to a session at the Association of Oregon Counties on a possible mental health reinvestment act that they're looking at. And one of the presentations was from the CJC folks on their dashboard and how keeping track of statistics. And of course, they throw the first graph up there, and it's got each county with either a green bar, below where you've dropped down, you've reduced your prison usage, or a red bar where you're going the wrong direction. And there were like 3 counties off to the left with large green bars, one of which was Lane County, the third one in. And it shows the great work we're doing through these programs. So we're, as you mentioned, just in those graduates facing the 7 graduates facing prison time, how much that saved, as we keep these people out of the system, even in the local jail, if we hadn't intervened, they probably would have continued to offend and ended up in the prison system also. So we've done an awesome, unbelievable job in cooperation across so many agencies, including the courts, including our parole and probation folks that, help with this, the specialty courts, and just how we supported it with, some of the funds out of justice reinvestment. We actually made up a shortfall in the treatment courts through that budget at one point. And this grant is just going to keep us doing that great work and working to get people whole and not treating them as throwaways. And also that long-term savings to the state on the prison side is just really important. But it just, it's a piece of this whole great big picture. I hope we see the mental health reinvestment work. That treatment courts are just part of that, but it's all part of that whole issue of trying to keep people out of our public safety criminal justice system that are really just dealing with a mental health issue. And the more we can, work on that Stepping Up initiative and do that work, the better it is. And this grant, is just one piece of that. And I really want to appreciate, the judge and you all for obtaining the grant. It's great to get some federal funding outside of that CJC and the budget that comes from the state, because we all know that we have to go up and fight for that every 2 years. And that's going to start in February or January, I guess, as we start working on that. So really looking forward to the great work you guys are going to continue to do in the treatment courts. Any other discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
See you Thursday.
So we are still running ahead of schedule.
I'd be happy, Mr. Chair, to do announcements at this point.
Okay, and then we might also get into some commissioners' business.
I think you do commissioner's business, and I asked Mr. Dingle if he would check with our folks to see if we actually are done with all of that around 10. We, I think, can do executive session between 10 and 10:30, before your 10:30, and get that done, and then you've opened up the rest of the morning for the last item this morning.
Great.
So I just have two items. One, as I stated earlier, I wanted to just provide the board with a little update on what's happening at the camp that was opened on Highway 99. Again, as we updated the board a couple weeks ago, we opened this camp to in response to over 100 individuals that were camping illegally on the Butterfly Lot earlier this month. It was an unsafe and unhealthy situation, documented incidents of human feces and vomit and other things that were at the Butterfly Lot that really needed to be rectified. We identified a county-owned property, about an acre, out on Highway 99, adjacent to services, 2 meals a day provided by the St. Vincent de Paul Lindholm Center on Highway 99. And other services available there, not far from St. Vincent de Paul's current Dusk to Dawn operation that I believe has now around 115 beds available for homeless individuals on a nightly basis. As of yet, we have weekly meetings with our incident command system team, which includes both City of Eugene and Lane County staff that are participating in that. We have liaisons from EPD, Lieutenant Mozan from EPD, and Linda Bravo from Lane County's Health and Human Services, our Human Services Division, that are working regularly with campers to address needs, and then staff from Health and Human Services, Public Works, County Administration, City Management, City Public Works departments that are all coordinating efforts in response. As of yesterday, we had approximately 105 campers on the site in 72 spaces. Last week, we installed a utility sink. As you know, we have porta potties on the site, including ADA accessible porta potties. We have hand washing stations, and last week we installed a utility sink to ensure that there is hot water, both hot and cold running water from inside the building. We've tested that water, so verified that it is safe. The back fence line was adjusted 10 feet out. It was originally adjusted 12 feet too far, thanks to Commissioner Farr, working coordination with the businesses out there. We identified that it had been moved too far, so our Public Works staff made sure that it was moved the appropriate site, that we could actually accommodate some additional tents in response to camping that had occurred in the last few weeks at the Butterfly Lot. We installed the USB charging station. County cameras and lights were installed last week to replace the Eugene Police Department's cameras and lights that have been there temporarily, so the EPD cameras and lights were removed now for more permanent cameras and lights. The county continues, along with the city, to work through the requests of the campers, so it needs to be noted that we are working very diligently and regularly with the campers and the businesses to be responsive to requests that can be accommodated. A truckload of small gravel is being delivered today to deal with some uneven ground and puddles. There has been some camping outside of the fence line that was established, and a handful of cars that have been stored on the site as well, and we're working through those issues. There were 2 campers that have been diagnosed with pneumonia. Our Health and Human Services staff are working to get them the medication, health care that they need. They were prescribed medication, as I understand, but the cost of that was a challenge, so our staff is working through gaining access to the services that they need. Tomorrow, a service fair will be held out at the site, and so this is intended to get various health and human service organizations to meet with campers to make sure that we're getting all of these individuals connected with the services that they need. This is not I need to stress this again, as I did a couple weeks ago, this was never intended to be a permanent solution. This was intended to be a transition from a really challenging camp that was set up at the Butterfly Lot that presented concerning health and safety issues to identify an environment that could be more controlled, but also from the Butterfly Lot camping, but also understanding that there was a further transition that needs to occur with this campsite to make it more structured and further enhance an environment of health and safety. That is the process that we are now in. I want to state clearly that while there are discussions about transitioning in the role with St. Vincent de Paul and the utilization of Dusk to Dawn operation, as well as the city's rest stop program, those conversations are ongoing and in the planning phases, and there is no date that has been solidified for that further transition to occur. Once we identify a date for that transition to happen, for Dusk to Dawn operations and potentially rest stop operations to occur, we will identify that date, notify individuals of that date, as well as the board and the city council, and give time for that transition to occur. So there's been some rumors about the camp shutting down at the end of the week and things happening that are just categorically false. But we do need to understand that there is a transition that needs to occur to really take it from there's a very positive article in the paper over the weekend and an open house that was hosted by the Community Alliance of Lane County, which appeared positive. I wasn't aware of that. I know that Commissioner Farr, who's done a fantastic job of regularly visiting the site and being present and working with businesses in the area, because it is Commissioner Farr's district, as well as working with campers and notifying us about things that need to be taken care of. As I understand, also was not aware of the open house that was happening or invited to that. So there are things happening there that, a lot of which are positive things that we want to support. There are also challenges and calls for service that have been made to EPD. There have been complaints from businesses in the middle of the night and issues that need to be addressed that we continue to work through. So this is a balancing act, and it's our goal and commitment to ensure the health and safety of individuals there, to be respectful of surrounding businesses and residents throughout this process, and to ultimately transition to a more safe and accountable and structured environment to ensure health and safety of campers there as well as the surrounding area, and ultimately to keep our eye on the longer term solution to this temporary model, which is to really identify and implement a permanent low barrier public shelter. So we continue those discussions. We are looking at the Highway 99 site as well as other sites in partnership with the City of Eugene on that front, on the public shelter solution, as well as looking at our continued focus on permanent supportive housing, which costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time to implement, but we need to make sure that we keep our eye on that ball, because that is ultimately the solution to ending homelessness, is getting people off the streets, out of tents and dusk to dawn operations and even public shelters, and into stable housing where they're connected to services. So as we're having these conversations about tent camps and public shelters, we need to remember the network of options that we want to make available. So that's that. I'll end there. And we intend to have another update for the board next week with hopefully some more details around that transition process and what that will look like. Welcome questions and comments from commissioners and the public on that, and appreciate everyone's involvement from city staff, and city officials, county staff, county officials and leaders, and our community partners. If there aren't any questions, if there are questions, I'll take those, and then I just have one other item.
Any questions on the Camp 99 update?
Okay. One other item, we have as the board knows, we've been working towards accreditation for our public health division, and for several years. This is an extensive process. As part of that process, it requires an on-site review, meetings and interviews, and state officials would like to schedule a meeting that would include at least 2 members of our Board of Health. We're having a transition happening with the board. These meetings would happen on February 7th and 8th. And I just wanted to put this out and ask if there are commissioners that are particularly interested in that. Of course, we'll notify the new commissioners when they're sworn in January of this, but from a scheduling standpoint, we'd like to be able to identify 2 commissioners that could participate February 7th and 8th in that effort. So additional updates will be provided to the board, but I wanted to ask the board's indulgence on and thoughts on participating, who would like to participate in those on-site meetings on February 7th and 8th.
I have no interest, Chair.
I'm sorry. I know Commissioner Farr, you've already expressed an interest. Commissioner Sorensen?
I'm interested in hearing more about the, you said meetings on February 7th and 8th. Are these all-day meetings, both days? Do they want the commissioners there together? Do they want the commissioners there separately? How do they want to do that?
That is all in the process of being developed. So I think that there are these 2 days that are scheduled for on-site meetings with state officials. They have asked for commissioners to be available. I think we will accommodate based on the availability of commissioners. If both commissioners are available at one time, they basically want to get, this was done previously when we've had check-ins on our FQHC certification. They've asked to meet with the Board of Health, and they want to know that, does the Board of Health meet regularly? To what extent are the commissioners engaged as a Board of Health? Are you aware of the work in public? You know, this varies based on counties, you know, around the state and around the country.
And also, if individual communities have different boards of health.
They do.
So this is a unique one. I personally would like to be part of this. I think it would be important to just involve the whole board and just say we'd be available for an hour or something like that. If they have limited questions like, you know, does the Board of Health meet, things like that, then I think we should just give them an hour of the board's time so that they can tell us whatever they need us to know, and we can give our opinions. Commissioner Farr, myself, the other commissioners can give their opinions if they're asked for. If not, if it's just a matter of information, and that Ms. Gaffney and the staff that are heading this up are going to be doing most of the talking, and we're just there to answer any questions, I think that's fine too. But I think it needs to be a lot more structured than just, can we be available on February 8 or 9? The answer is no. I can't be available for 48 hours on February 7 and 8 or whatever. But I think that really having it more structured will be more my preference. But I definitely think that the commissioners that want to be involved, including me and Commissioner Farr, among others, should be invited.
So it definitely will be a structured, they will be structured meetings. That has not all been defined yet. What we're trying to do is just gauge where's their interest, and do you have in those who are interested, do you have availability on the 7th and 8th? And then we'll schedule those meetings. You'll get an agenda, and and will participate. And it really, the opportunity for commissioners is to understand a little bit about the process and what is going through, but really to gain feedback from the commissioners as to your involvement, understanding the role of a public health agency and the Board of Health in that, in providing those services. The challenge with making these having all of the commissioners available, as you know, is the public noticing requirements and just the challenges with that. And they did not request that they meet with the entire Board of Health, but just that they have one or two members of the Board of Health that can sort of speak to, you know, that role, your role on the Board of Health. So I think what I've heard is Commissioner Sorensen and Commissioner Farr are interested in participating. We certainly will notify all of the commissioners of those meetings and welcome feedback, but we'll work with Commissioner Farr and Commissioner Sorensen to schedule those dates and times specifically, and then provide you with details about that. And I think a report back to the board, the full board, certainly about that process and the outcomes of that process will happen.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Sorensen.
How often does this certification or how often does that happen?
Well, this is an accreditation process.
Accreditation.
So this is, we do, I think it's every couple years for our federally qualified health center designation, which is a federal designation that allows us to, that requires a lot of things. You have to be certified, and then we can receive higher reimbursement rates for that accreditation, for that certification. That happens every couple years. This is different from that. This is an accreditation process that is really lengthy and involved. And so once we receive the accreditation, it's likely we will be reaccredited. You know, there will be a process in future years in which they will come back and want to have ongoing conversations. But this is new. So this type of meeting with members of the Board of Health and members with our staff, this is all new because we're seeking this new accreditation.
Yeah, good. Well, I just take the view that this is very important. If it is a matter of us as the Board of Health telling them that we've had many initiatives over the past several years, that we are committed to performing our duties, and it's going to be short, and our role is pretty limited relative to the staff role, then just we'll just have a brief special meeting of the board and deal with it, you know.
So you're asking for a special meeting of the board?
I'm
to do
saying
that?
on our end that I think it's important enough for us to spend an hour with them, a half an hour with them, whatever they think is needed, and to get it all, you know, done with all the commissioners being able to give their perspective on it.
That's not what the folks who are doing the accreditation has asked for. I can run that back to our staff and say, do we want to have a full board of health meeting? I just know that they had asked for one or two commissioners to provide some information about the role. It is not to set policy. It is not to make decisions. It is simply to
maybe have the staff do that, you know. If it's not that important, then maybe have the staff do it. I just don't think we should be separating out commissioners to speak for the Board of Health when the other commissioners aren't there to say, well, by the way, we haven't taken that position or whatever. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Yeah, this is the request that's come to us from the entity that is doing the accreditation, so we can accommodate certainly whatever the wishes of the board are.
So I want to step in here, having been through the national accreditation for Lane Community College when I sat on their board. The agency doing the accreditation tells you what they want. You don't tell them basically how you're going to deal with it. So we can suggest maybe they meet with the entire board, but you know, if they say we want to meet with individual commissioners one at a time, part of that is, and this happened with the national accreditation with LCC, is they want to gauge the board's individual knowledge as an individual board member of the runnings of the college. You know, when I was there, and I imagine it's very similar here. They want to judge a couple individual board members' knowledge of the public health agency and our understanding of it, not get five of us up here as a panel answering questions en masse, I think is, and then dealing with the whole issue of public meetings laws, recording, open to the public, minutes and everything else that goes with that. I imagine Karen can talk to the accreditation people and see, but I think basically all we were trying to do was assess, are there at least 2 commissioners that might be available on the 7th and 8th, and I think it's not necessarily for the entire day, both days. I'm sure they're not going to want to interview you for 16 hours straight, but that was just, I think, what Steve's objective today was, just to get that judgment. But I think, it is good feedback. He can ask about whether or not it should be an entire meeting of the Board of Health or not. But I think part of it's going to be, they're the people doing the accreditation. They'll tell us what they really want. And we can either choose to cooperate or not cooperate, and at risk of whether we get the accreditation or not.
That's my understanding of what they've asked for. They go through this process with organizations regularly, and they've asked to meet with a couple of the members of that. I mean, again, it's not to set policy or make decisions, but just to have a conversation about what the role of the Board of Health is and members of the Board of Health. If it's the desire of the board to have a full meeting of the Board of Health, we can ask them if they would like that to happen. I think they're probably going to say we asked to meet with we don't need that, but they would accommodate it potentially. So again, I'm asking for some direction from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In answer to the question once is how often this happens, the accreditation. And it's something that we've been working on for quite some time. And the Board of Health, I think, is just a series of questions that they just need to make sure that the Board of Health is actively involved in the work of the Health Department. So it's pretty exciting. I think they've been looking forward to this for quite some time. And I've had a chance to sit in on the federal recertification a couple of times, which is pretty extensive. And they do have some pointed questions for the board members. But it really, most of the work is done with staff and working through the processes that happen outside of the policymaking decisions of the Board of Health. So we did a massive accreditation in, I think it was February of this last year, which our Health Department passed on, I think it was 85 of 86 areas, and the 86th area they quickly rectified. So we can expect good things from this. And so it's pretty exciting. So thanks, Mr. Mokrihise, for bringing this forward.
So any other announcements?
Nope.
So if we can quickly do maybe commissioner's business, then we can recess for executive session and then come back at 10:30. So any announcements from commissioners? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to talk about, ever so briefly, about the Poverty and Homelessness Board that the board that reports to the Board of Commissioners is a policy recommendation board that reports to the Board of Commissioners. And Mr. Chair, you talked about Mayor Sandra Larson is a member of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, as is Mayor Vinnis, as is Sean Van Gordon from Springfield, and I'm the representative from the board, from the Lane County Board of Commissioners. The sheriff's also on there, as is Mr. Fox, as are Noreen Dunnels from United Way. It's a pretty broad cross-section that makes the policy recommendations from the Poverty and Homelessness Board. And the recommendation that Mayor Larson was talking about was from a motion that occurred last Thursday at the Poverty and Homelessness Board meeting, a week ago Thursday, excuse me, last Thursday was Thanksgiving. A week ago Thursday, that each of the elected members of the board take it back to their individual jurisdictions to ask for consideration of winter strategy programs to add spaces for, such as on public land, in businesses, and or in places of worship for winter parking that would be administered by the owner of the property. Mayor Larson took that back to Veneta, and Sean Van Gordon took it back to Springfield. Mayor Vinnis has taken it to Eugene, and each of the jurisdictions is stepping up in their own way, in their own different way, to make sure that we can alleviate some of the camping issues, some of the RV and car camping issues that crop up in particular during the rainy season. The board of the Poverty and Homelessness Board has a subcommittee called the Shelter and Supportive Housing Subcommittee, Mr. Mokrihise, that you know about, and it's the one that has been working on a permanent low-barrier shelter along with the city of Eugene and the other jurisdictions. And so the recommendations come through the Shelter and Supportive Housing Committee to the Poverty and Homelessness Board and then to the Board of County Commissioners. It's not an intergovernmental board, but it's a multi-jurisdictional board. That is to say, it's a Lane County board that reports only to the Board of County Commissioners, but it does have membership from the other jurisdictions. A great deal of work goes into it, and the Poverty and Homelessness Board has been there for 4 years now and made some great strides in terms of addressing some of the more critical needs surrounding poverty and homelessness. There's a lot more to say on that, Mr. Mokrajewski, and reiterate that you have done a good job, a superb job, along with staff, in addressing the needs as they come up in an ad hoc basis as well as on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you. So real quick, so as we know, we had AOC conference before Thanksgiving, and a topic of discussion was actually in the Federal Lands Management Subcommittee, and that was the Wyden-Crapo bill. And so just to kind of give a real brief update, because there's much more to come. I think you probably saw that Senator Wyden and Senator Crapo have introduced a bipartisan SRS, and hoping to get it gotten stuffed in the last stuff coming out of Congress now. And what this will be is kind of that stopgap that also allows Congress begin working on. It was a working title. I can't remember the name of the title. But anyway, this is this idea of a foundation being set up to bring more consistent funding to what we call our ONC or timber counties. And, but of course, much has changed. First of all, we don't necessarily, I don't know who's going to be the new Ways and Means chair in the House. On the Senate side, Senator Grassley looks like he will be the new Senate Finance Chair, as Senator Hatch has retired. And but Senator Wyden will continue to remain ranking member of Finance. And so I will tell you that the ONC Association has been highly engaged, and I'm really pleased to hear that Wyden's staff has taken a lot of the ideas, recommendations from not only ONC but AOC as well. And so the bill looks like it is going to be actually introduced as a bill, and much more to concept. ONC has not voted to endorse. What they have is stated is that we will continue to encourage Senator Wyden and Senator Crapo until we actually get a look at a bill and what's all entailed. There's more to come. I don't want to go into too much detail because I know we're time limits, but I just wanted to bring an update on that, and things seem to be moving forward in what I believe is a positive light. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Sorensen.
You know, I was reading a little bit about this, and one of the issues with the administration is, and this came up, I don't know, maybe a year ago at an AOC meeting I attended, it was about who was the BLM director. Do they have a BLM director at this time?
No.
Because that was brought up as being an impediment to county commissioners, you know, talking with the administration in that, you know, and it's so important that Congress changed the statute about the BLM and said, we don't want the Interior Secretary to just appoint anybody to the job of being BLM director. We want it appointed by the president. We want it confirmed by the Senate. We want it to be a really important job, one of the 500 or so that requires Senate confirmation, like a 4-star general, like a cabinet secretary. And so the Western members of Congress got this passed to elevate the BLM within the administration. And here we are, 2 years since the election of the president, and you know, and it's not causing me a lot of heartburn. I was never going to be on the phone with this BLM director. Maybe Commissioner Lycan would be, but I'm not. And my point is that I think that it's just important, and maybe we should write a letter to somebody. I don't know who, but you know, say this has never happened before. Never. This has never happened before. And so I just think it's something that is important, and the Western members, county commissioners, more than anybody else, would be the ones to raise this.
Mr. Chair, I can give an update, but not now because I know we're time, but I can give an update if you'd like, Commissioner Sorensen, on that particular issue.
Yeah, I'd like to try and wrap up announcements here and just remind the commissioners that not to make appointments for lunch next week because we are hosting the volunteer lunch next week. So keep your lunch open for the volunteer appreciation lunch. And then we'll move on to agenda team requests and any agenda team requests. Is that, Commissioner Farr, I thought you were going to have one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as a request from the Poverty and it was a request from the Poverty and Homelessness Board that each of the 4 jurisdictions represented on the board take it back to their board to look at additional camping sites, car camping sites throughout the winter months. And that would include working with the Chambers of Commerce as far as the city jurisdictions are concerned, working with the nonprofit organizations and other government jurisdictions, and for the county taking a look at potential use of parks that are unused for the winter to use for small campsites for sanctioned camping. So I'd like Mr. Mokrasky or for the agenda team, excuse me, to consider putting on the agenda a discussion regarding additional campsites for the winter months through April of 2019, excuse me. And that would include businesses, places of worship, and public property.
Commissioner Sorensen.
I would definitely favor this, and I wanted to bring to the board's attention that the city of Tacoma has also had a big homeless issue. And one of the things they've done is they've started using larger tents for these tent communities. And the idea is that part of the harshness of the Northwest weather, of course, is rain. And by building these larger tents to encompass whatever tents the people camping in them have, it certainly makes it a lot easier for cooking, for cleaning, and it is much more humane than not. And I just wanted to, mention that Tacoma is doing this, and they're doing it now. And I don't know what our staff has had communications with them, but it seems like they've been avoiding some of the litigation over whether the government is doing enough to help homeless people by doing more. And I don't know how much it costs. That's something I'm always interested in knowing. But it does seem to be an answer of a community that's maybe larger than ours, maybe has more of a problem, less of a problem, I don't know, but it is something that is a little more relevant to our community than others. So yes, I do think we need to be much more active and much more aggressive on this. And if they want to propose this and they want a meeting and they want us to do something, it's a pretty important group of people in our community. I think we need to follow their advice.
Thanks for that, Commissioner Sorensen. We do have a communal living situation in our winter strategies that exist in the Dusk to Dawn program. St. Vincent de Paul operates their 117 beds under a single tent, under a series of tents right now. And the proposal potentially for the 99 camp would be a single or a couple of larger tents for communal living. Some people have their own vehicles, and this would address people who have vehicles. Other people prefer to live in a non-communal environment for whatever reason it may be. So this is a part of a multi-pronged approach to addressing winter camping needs and winter camping strategies. Thank you.
And I'll give my support for the third head nod real quick here, because there is a lot of times these folks, their last major asset is their vehicle. And without a safe place to camp and store it, where it might actually get towed and they lose possession of their final last large asset. So I think it's real important to look at that particular strategy.
And we do already use Lane County property, as we all know.
Yes.
LCBH is, we have camping there.
Yeah, it's just, we can, I agree with taking another look, see if there's any way to expand. So we'll add that to our agenda team request. And I want to make my own quick agenda team request here that we take a look at our relationship with Lane Council of Governments relative to some of our services. I have to express my disappointment with the coordination recently between LCOG and the county as we tried to modernize our phone services here, and the lack of cooperation we've received in our ability to contact CenturyLink on the transfer of numbers that we've utilized as the public understands contacting Lane County for years, and the obstructions and roadblocks that have been placed on our ability to make that transition smooth when we're a dues-paying member in that organization. And it just, I would like to have a better understanding of our contractual relationship with LCOG and what our dues are used for and what control we have over that sort of cooperation. Because it has gotten to the point where we're having our employees being accused of wrongdoing, supposedly for requesting what is, I would consider, public information. And I haven't heard any statements of exemptions through statute that the contract telephone issues between LCOG and CenturyLink are somehow or another exempt, from public, from being public record and public information. So I'm extremely disappointed in how this is moving. We've got to the end of the year really to wrap this up, and we're getting nothing but obstruction right now from somebody we pay dues to. And we're one of the major dues paying. So I would like to have a work session on our contractual relationships with LCOG in the future. I see one head nod from Commissioner Farr, Commissioner Lighten, Commissioner Sorensen, Commissioner Williams. I think that's unanimous head nods there. So with that, I'm going to read us into exec session, see if we can handle that really quick and get back here by 10:30. So the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 1926602D, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decisions will be made in executive session. We are going to come back out in public session at 10:30 for a time certain public hearing. We are now in recess, and if the commissioners would please not be tardy up to the Board of Commissioners conference room. We are in executive session. I'd like to call us back to order for our regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. Again, this is Tuesday, November 27th, 2018. We just finished up our executive session, and we are down to item 8B, which is the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 1810 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 6 to bring the rules governing public property in the downtown Eugene area into alignment and declaring an emergency. And hopefully we'll have Mr. Dingle here in a minute. Looks like he just walked through the door because this is his item, and I will turn it over to Mr. Dingle to introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I briefly, this is pretty straightforward. During the situation we had on the Butterfly lot, it was brought to my attention by the city attorney that our hours of operation were different than the city's, and that the Butterfly lot and the property contiguous to the PSB were the only public property in downtown Eugene that didn't have an hour of operation that closed the property to the general public from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. So I made this amendment to the code so that would bring our hours of operation in line with the cities and the surrounding property.
Mr. Sorensen.
Thank you very much. First of all, on the issues that have arisen at the Butterfly lot, I was in the public service building and talked to one of the custodial staff, and they said that there was a fire at the corner of 8th and Oak, and apparently one of the people that was there camping had a candle in their tent, and they were on county property, so they weren't on the city's right-of-way. They were on a county property. And because they were camping there and they weren't paying attention, the candle caught their sleeping bag on fire. I learned later the fire department had to come and put the fire out. I didn't see any of that. I just heard about it. But that's the kind of thing that it causes me to think that we should be thinking about providing for additional closure of this property. I like the idea that it's not being closed during the daytime so that, number one, the public can use it, and number three, that if there is valid protest, and this kind of gets to my point, in terms of the types of things that people do during a protest, during what I might call a First Amendment protected protest. One would be, yelling. One would be, putting up signs. Another would be picketing, going back and forth in some sort of public property. And I just want to get on the record that all of that protected speech activity, it is across the street from the county courthouse. So to me, it's a heightened sense of importance that government protect rights of expression, and not just Oregon's Constitution, but U.S. Constitution. I just wanted you to get on the record here some of your comments about the importance of making sure that those rights are protected and that this ordinance does not impinge on those rights.
Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Sorensen, sure. You'll recall there was an extensive discussion about this issue in a much more speech-sensitive area when the board had passed the same sort of hours of operation for the Free Speech Plaza. And so the courts began, starting with the United States Supreme Court in 1984, all the way through the so-called Occupy protests in the early mid-2000s, have consistently held that when it comes to public property, and as a matter of fact, the Oregon Court of Appeals has made the same finding, that it is if the ordinance or the rule that's in question is speech neutral, content neutral, which this is. It doesn't say people who are whatever in favor of something can use it at a certain time, people who are opposed can't. So it's content neutral on its face, that government bodies can adopt reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on the use of public property. And that's especially critical when there are other alternatives for the individuals to use. So to your point, Commissioner Sorensen, while they cannot camp on the, for example, stay overnight on the public property, they are certainly free to walk up and down the street. And there's also just really, and part of the reasonable restriction rule, time, place, and manner, is to provide for things like facilities. That's one of the issues that you mentioned, the fire. There was also a lot of issues when those folks were over there with public urination and defecation, because during the middle of the night, they have there's typically not an easy place for people to go. During the day, they can walk into the public service building, they can use the other restrooms that they open up during the day. That's why it's important, I think, that our hours of operation sync up with our hours of operation and other governmental bodies here. And the other thing I want to emphasize is this is also, it's not just, I know it was brought to our attention as a result of the situation involving the butterfly lot, but it's important to remember that it doesn't just, this is the tool that we need, that law enforcement needs for people who aren't camping. These are people who are, and I'm going to say this, there were two people this morning when I got here at 4 o'clock in the morning that are down in the parking lot. And someone needs to have the ability to go out to them and say, hey, we're not open, you need to leave here, because there's vehicles, sheriff's office property down there. We run into the same situation, for example, with folks in the butterfly lot, in the actual parking lot, where, again, that's the typical tool. Someone goes and says, if the county's not open, this parking lot isn't open, you need to leave. And this gives law enforcement that tool to and again, I want to emphasize, these are not people who are camping. These are people that are just walking around that apparently don't have any business. So I don't want people to just focus on that. But to your point, Commissioner, it is well decided that public bodies have the right, as long as the rules are content neutral, to impose reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions on the use of their property.
So any further questions for staff?
So just to be clear then, on the butterfly lot, as distinct from the sidewalk, that area is open for lawful protests from 7 a.m. until 11 p.m., including demonstrations, and there's no restriction in terms of them applying for a permit or something like that. And I think I might have a disagreement with you on one narrow point, and that is, you said they're free to walk up and down the street. I thought maybe there would be a City of Eugene ordinance or whatever that would say, well, if you're going to really block a street, that's a separate issue from using a sidewalk.
Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Sorensen, I misspoke. It is sidewalk. There's nothing, the sidewalks are open 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if I said street, I did not mean. And as a matter of fact, in the Babson case in the Oregon Court of Appeals, that was one of the claims that the defendants in that case made, which was that essentially, if I'm doing engaged in protected First Amendment speech, I can do it anywhere. And the Court of Appeals soundly rebuked them and pointed out, no, you may not stand in the middle of Fifth Street in downtown Portland at rush hour, no matter how, quote, legitimate or sincere your political speech is. You can't do that. And that's exactly that point. As long as they're not, and I meant to say sidewalk, the sidewalks are open 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and so the what I might call speech activities, expression activities of saying the government is not doing enough to solve the homeless problem, or the government is spending too much money to solve the homeless problem, or there is no homeless problem, or whatever people want to say, those speech activities, those expression activities can go on the butterfly lot within the period of time that the ordinance allows. And with regard to the sidewalk, which is governed by the city rules, that's open 24 hours a day.
Correct.
So it's not as if we are shutting down a free speech activity on the sidewalk or at all. And secondly, we are providing for protection of the public property during the hours of 11 PM to 7 AM. Okay.
I think that's all accurate, Commissioner
Yep,
Sorensen.
thank you
And
so
I would-
much.
And I would point out, too, that I can't remember, I was trying to look back. I'm sure y'all remember when it was. It's been at least 2 years since the board adopted the hours of operation for the Free Speech Plaza. I think it's been more than 2 years. There hasn't been a single legal challenge to that. I thought that was important to mention, too, because this, obviously, arguably that property, which is designated as, the free speech area, would seem to have a heightened sort of political aspect to it, and it hasn't been challenged.
And I just want to point out, it's 11 till 6 AM.
Oh, 11 to 6, thanks.
So at least the
Yes, it is.
ordinance currently reads. So if there's, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Dingle, for bringing this first reading to us today. We'll be setting
it's
the
second reading.
Excuse me, the
I'm getting ready to open the public
Right,
hearing.
the
So
public hearing today and second reading. But I just wanted to point out that in parallel to this, the county is, on an ongoing basis, looking for safe and sanctioned places for people to camp. Because our main goal, as always, is permanent housing. And we're going to fail to achieve that for many years to come. We're not going to find permanent housing for everyone, and there will always be a need. There will always be a demand for people to have safe places to sleep at night. Everybody needs a safe place to sleep at night. The county is doing a very good job of identifying not only places, but innovative and different ways for people to safely sleep at night. That has nothing to do with the curfew that we're talking about today. The curfew on the north and west corner of the park block, the so-called park blocks, is just bringing it in line with the other three corners of the park blocks. So, and I thank Commissioner Sorensen for pointing out that that really doesn't impinge on people's right to free speech. The free speech is available to people in the manners that Commissioner Sorensen, waving signs, shouting, yelling, playing loud music, whatever it may be, those aren't going to be restricted. Thank you.
So if there's no further questions for staff at the moment, I will open the public hearing on ordinance number 1810. Is there anyone signed up for the public hearing? Is there anyone here that is not signed up that would like to address the board on ordinance 1810? Seeing none, I am going to close the public hearing on ordinance number 1810 and move on to deliberations by the board and a possible motion. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to move approval of ordinance 1810. This is in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 6 to bring the rules governing public property in downtown Eugene area into alignment and declaring an emergency.
Second?
It's been moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve ordinance 1810. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Farr.
A question for Mr. Dingle. Presuming this passes today, when does this take effect?
It's an emergency ordinance, so it takes effect immediately.
Immediately. Thank you.
Ordinarily, it would be 30 days.
So I'd like to just take a minute to, thank staff for bringing this forward. It does bring us in alignment with the other three corners of the public square as it was originally defined. In fact, the roads used to go around that square, and before they punched 8th Avenue and Oak through the square and divided it into 4 quadrants. And now all 4 quadrants will be under the same hours of operation. And I want to make note that I normally object to emergency clauses in legislation. I do not like to see them used. They're abused quite often to shut down the ability for the public to refer something to back to the public under Oregon's referral process. This is one of those cases where I support the use of the emergency clause as it's necessary for us to bring things into alignment and avoid some of the issues we found, like having a fire occur across the street on county property and the possible liabilities involved with camping activities on that downtown property. I would like to also note that, we have made significant efforts to find places for folks to sleep legally. and we continue to make those efforts. We've been making significant efforts in the realm of poverty and homelessness for years. I believe if you want to go to our website, there's a complete listing of programs available that we've supported as a board over the year. And we've made some great strides, and we're continuing to try and make great strides to follow up on the TAC report and work towards our at least 300 additional permanent supported housing beds. And we're working with the city of Eugene on identifying and working towards that 75-bed low-barrier emergency shelter. Camping outside, even in places like Camp 99, car camping, et cetera, is still considered unhoused by HUD. The federal government does not consider that sheltered.
Correct.
So we need to work towards indoor shelter, ultimately, in a long-run strategy. And this board is working on that through our, in fact, we're going to have some stuff come up next week in our consent calendar on the MLK Housing First project, and we have other issues we'll be moving forward at that time. But we're looking at that. We've been supportive of the Veterans Legacy, which is another considered sheltered housing, you know, not a tent, not a car. And I think that's what's really important is the work we've been continuing to do on that while trying to maintain public safety here in the downtown core and still allowing for free speech and not trying to control the content of speech. I think we're balancing all those in this ordinance, and I really want to appreciate staff for bringing this forward, and I look forward to you know, the transition that we've had here with the Free Speech Plaza, where we haven't had issues with the Free Speech Plaza since, I think that was over 5 years ago we adopted that, believe it or not, because Commissioner Farr was not on the board at that time. So it has been a while. So that's operated successfully without impeding free speech and has not been challenged legally. So I think that's a really important thing to note. Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, for bringing up the emergency clause component of this. Just a narrow point or maybe question. When the government uses the power to say in an ordinance or in a state legislative enactment that there is an emergency and therefore the ordinance goes into effect immediately and there's no right of the public to seek a review of that by having a public vote. When that happens, what is the standard for the emergency? Is it that the governing board says that it's an emergency and that's the extent of the judicial review of that? In other words, what if someone said, oh, it's not really an emergency, it's urgent, but it's not an emergency, or it's really important, but it's not an emergency, or yeah, I could see why they wanted to do it quickly, but it's not an emergency. What is the standard that we have to meet to say it's an emergency?
Well, it is contained in the
Ordinance.
In the ordinance, and I view that very differently. I know what Commissioner Bozovich is referring to, that some of the decisions by the labels that have been put on things by the state legislature, that's virtually unreviewable. And they seem to be things that aren't really, you know, emergency.
Well, you weren't there, so you don't know if it was an
I
emergency
don't
or
know.
not.
They,
Okay.
on their face, they're not
Okay.
like dealing with something like this where we're talking about people starting fires, defecating, those sorts of things.
Right.
So the way that I treat it here when I present these things to you is that when we put together that board packet, that you have the relevant information in it that helps you understand and the public see what it is. I also view this, our process is a little bit different because we have this 13-day period by charter where people have the opportunity to come in and offer the public comment before it can happen. This isn't something where this can happen without the opportunity for public input. So I think those are relevant.
But nothing's been overturned by a port commission or by a city or a county or the legislature. No, court say, sorry, you didn't document that this was an emergency. We don't really think it's an emergency. You probably think it is, but we don't. And the reviewability of the emergency.
Right.
Yeah, and by the way, just for purposes of history, we had a commissioner here from the Springfield district Commissioner Dwyer, he would never vote for any ordinance with an emergency clause in it, period. He didn't feel that we should ever enact an emergency at all. And you know, in this instance, there'd be a 4-1 vote, or whatever, because he felt, as has been expressed, that there's no reviewability of this by the public. And so he just had a strong view.
And Commissioner Bozovich, Commissioner Sorensen, I strongly feel that the opportunity and the requirement of that 13-day period is that check. People have, we have to put it out there. The packet is out there. It lays out what it is. People have 13 days and a public meeting to come in and challenge that to you as their elected official and say, this isn't an emergency. So I think that, in my mind, that's a sufficient check.
And I will note that there is still an initiative process where
Right.
this ordinance could be put out by initiative, just the signature collecting requirements are different. And you actually have a longer time to collect signatures, but you have to collect more. But under a normal county ordinance process, you'd have 45 days to collect a certain number of signatures to get it back, to refer it to the ballot. This kind of cuts off that opportunity, but you still have the opportunity to file a citizens initiative petition to reverse this action. So it's not completely, it just cuts off one aspect of that initiative right of the citizens. The referral right doesn't cut off the initiative right of the citizens to try and overturn a board action.
That's
Which,
an excellent point. I was going to mention
Yeah.
that, which is this isn't for, there's nothing that prevents the citizens from,
yeah.
as you said, going through the initiative process and.
But I have seen things at the legislature that were, fairly mundane statutory changes that were, emergencies were declared, and I just couldn't understand what the emergency was. And it seemed to be for the sole purpose of cutting off the referral process.
Right.
Versus an actual emergency. And I think in this case, there is a public health need that justifies the emergency clause. And it's one of the reasons why I'm supporting the ordinance as written. Otherwise, I'd be making a motion to pull the emergency clause out of it. So, further discussion, motion, Commissioner Farr.
Just, I do have one more question, but, I've been a part of other bodies that did use the emergency clause far more frequently than we do at Lane County. And it really,
I think this is about the third time we have, and mostly it was because we had some deadline we had to meet.
exactly. But, we're the only jurisdiction locally that has a Human Services Commission. And I wanted to point out the work that our Human Services Department and our Human Services Commission, which is intergovernmental, but it reports to the Board of County Commissioners, the work that they do regarding poverty, homelessness, camping, et cetera. And I'd like to, it'd be remiss in not mentioning the name Steve Manella. Steve's our senior employee in Lane County who has really devoted his life to finding ways to alleviate poverty and homelessness and taking care of the human conditions that make living more difficult. But I do have a question. If you're ever here on Saturday morning at about 5 a.m., about the crack of dawn, which is before 6 a.m., you see the farmers market setting up out there because they get here, when the flowers wake up, I guess. So how does this affect that the post-dawn arrival of farmers market?
Oh, because we have a lease with them.
Right on. And their lease allows them to use the property.
They have a lease to do that, and we give them specific permission to be there, to set up.
Perfect. Thank you.
I mean, to make clear, that actually raises a good point. Remember, this is, for different things, this can be permission can be given for something. So, for example, if there were a parade that was scheduled to end at midnight through downtown, permission could be obtained to extend that. Yeah, this is not just absolute on all ways. That's a great point, Commissioner Farr. I should have mentioned that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Any further discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, this is an ordinance, so I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Lyken.
Aye.
Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Farr.
Aye.
Commissioner Bozovich.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously, 5-0. Thank you, Steve. So we've already taken care of all of our morning business, it looks like, so I am going to recess the Board of Commissioners until 1:30 this afternoon, where we'll reconvene here in Harris Hall for Public Works items. We are in recess.